The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the show. The West Stand is our new show for this season. It's out on a Monday and a Friday, normally, but because we've got loads of silly Monday games coming up, we're having to move them all around.
Very, very inconsiderate.
Very much so. But you can find it on YouTube. You can find it in your podcast app as well, where we welcome in a load of different guests from across the world of Leeds United, be it commentators, journalists, and so on and so forth. My name's Dan Moylan. Hello. With me is Michael Normanton.
All right.
I'm really good. Privacy. Talk to me about privacy on up to 10 devices.
You're talking NordVPN here. I thought you were after something different there. Yes, that's good, isn't it? You can tunnel all your information to elsewhere, I believe is how it works.
Sounds like a lot of diggings involved in that, Michael.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're out on a public Wi-Fi network or whatever, use your VPN. Keep your online identity and your data nice and private. I mean, saving money is your favourite trick.
Always.
The king of Pontefract in that regard in many ways. How can I save money on flights, hotel subscriptions from other countries?
By pretending you're in that country or a different country or any country.
So let's not say pretending, let's say you are virtually in that country.
You're virtually there.
Sounds more kind of cyber and exciting, doesn't
it?
That's what a VPN helps you to do, as well as view things from around the world. Maybe you need to be in a different country in order to watch a streaming service or whatever.
Yeah, like a
football.
Club TV station that's available in Europe, but not in the UK, for example.
Good news is NordVPN is the fastest VPN in the world, and you can find the offer at nordvpn.com/TSB. I think it's 4 additional months on top of your discounted 2-year plan, risk-free as well. There is a 30-day money-back guarantee, nordvpn.com/TSB, and you can find the link in the episode description box. And we welcome our guest for today then, LUTV commentator BRYN Law. Hello, BRYN.
Hi.
Thank you for coming back. Been an interesting couple of weeks for you, hasn't it? As a commentator on LUTV, a lot of action to get your teeth into.
A lot of goals. Goodness me, there've been a lot of goals. Well, 4 anyway. Not many or any, indeed, against. Unless you're talking about Millwall, but nobody's really talking about Millwall, are they?
Yeah, I've only written down the words Cardiff, Coventry and Watford, and then Sunderland have just skipped straight out to Sunderland there.
It was a friendly in the middle. It was just to rotate some players, wasn't it? A friendly for fitness. That's what the FA Cup was.
And that's the narrative we're going to stick to. Yeah.
In front of quite a big crowd.
Yes. Starting with Cardiff, 7-0. That was fun, I bet.
Yeah, it was great. It was genuinely really, really good. I mean, it was actually, it was historic, wasn't it? Because it was only at the end that anybody seemed to realise that Southampton was the last time that this had happened, which I was really quite surprised, but I don't know why I was surprised, because it's not a commonplace scoreline, but I thought that somewhere along the line Leeds would have squeezed in another 7 or somewhere, but they didn't, so they hadn't. And that Southampton game, for people of kind of my generation, I mean, I was only 3 when that game took place, but I know of it even despite that. That was like there's iconic elements to the performance in that, the little bit with the back flicks and all the rest of it that you absorb naturally if you've been around watching football for quite a long time, because that was the mighty Leeds doing what mighty Leeds did. And my dad, who was a Liverpool fan, used to whisper bad things about Leeds in my ear if they ever appeared on television. And when Norman Hunter used to appear, he used to whisper, "My dirty bastard," and all that sort of stuff. So I knew about that game, for sure. I knew about that game. So to be present the next time it happened was really quite special. I thought that was really good.
I wrote about that actually for the intro of the new mag that's out for the Sunderland game, in fact. But we how that game and the clip of it is kind of one of the foundational bits of discovering Leeds, isn't it? As a kid, it's like it's
the Glory Years video, wasn't it?
It's on the Glory Years video, and it's one of those. It's one of the iconic bits, because I guess a lot of it's wasn't captured on film. Yeah. So he's lucky that one of the most famous bits of it was that. So it's
funny to think in an era now where, particularly midweek, every single game in the league is covered, and you just expect to be able now to pick one up whenever you can. And then sometimes like games like the FA Cup game will come around and you're like, well, why aren't we on telly? I don't understand. Why can't I watch this somewhere? To think that actually in that era, it was very, very few and far between that got selected for live broadcast and or recording to maybe be the main feature on Match of the Day. But yeah, it's a pretty rare thing. Maybe being skewed by the fact that we lost 7-3 to Forest.
Yeah.
And 6-4.
I was at that one as well.
And 6-4 to Preston.
I wasn't at that one. But so I've seen 7 scored at Ellen Road, just not kind of at the right end.
Yeah.
But the way it panned out, the fact that the goals kept going in, and then you got to within the last couple of minutes of the game and there was that extra one and everyone's still clamouring for yet another goal. and they duly produced it as well. So the drama, the narrative tale was sweetly concluded on that basis, and I actually enjoyed the ruthlessness of the whole process. You know, that the bit at which Leeds realise, goodness me, we are a lot better than these, and rather than we're 2 up, we've won the game, we'll be fine. We're going to just keep going and keep going and keep going. Aided and abetted by Cardiff's approach to the game as well. And they did. And it was, you know, it was mighty.
Do you think that game has catalysed something? It's only a small sample size so far based on Coventry and Watford, but it feels like there's just a little switch has been flicked to me. I don't know if I'm imagining it.
Well, I think the process began at Burnley, because at the end of the game at Burnley, for which there was a bit of flack flying around in the aftermath, for what on paper seemed to be a reasonable away point at one of your main promotion rivals, who didn't lay a glove on you for 90 minutes plus. But I think it came out of, we did the post-match, for instance, with Ethan Ampadu, who spoke very well at the end of the Burnley game. And we're saying, oh, good point, blah, 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 because that's what we do. And he was a lot more circumspect. He was kind of, well, and you sense that actually, I think he'd come out of a disappointed dressing room, because I think they'd collectively gone, actually, they weren't great, were they? We should probably have won that. Right. And there was a sense of kind of disappointment.
There's a hunger for more.
Yeah, so I think the switch came from that, where they went, come on, guys, you know, we'll do the defensive bit for sure, but then let's do the other bit as well. So Cardiff, it felt like they felt the full effect of the kind of aftermath of that Burnley bit, and then you've seen it in subsequent games as well, because it should have been the same scoreline at Coventry, and it could quite easily have been the same scoreline at Watford as well. So there is potential that Tony used the word purring. He said after the match when we were chatting on Tuesday night, he's got them purring now, and it's right, because they're just. You sense it with teams. I've been around teams in the past who are successful, who realise after a season has progressed to a point that as a collective, they're good. And they get that sense. You see it you sense it at training ground, because there's kind of just a quiet air of business to be done, but confidence that we can do it. And then you sense it on a match day. And even the way teams stand in the tunnel, I've been around successful teams in the tunnel. They carry themselves in a slightly different way in the tunnel.
Dorigo said that as well, you know, it's funny.
Really?
Yeah, when we spoke to him last. He said, sometimes you'll be in the tunnel and he said, you'll just be saying, you look at the opposition, we're not losing today.
Yeah, that's it. And there's one side kind of carry, I'm trying to do it so visibly now, you know, it's shoulders thrown back, heads up, kind of clear-eyed. Eyes on the prize, and they're walking out knowing that as long as they do their things, they'll win this game. That professionals have a certainty about this stuff that all of us probably, even in our day-to-day lives, lack. But they kind of weigh it up and go, we are better than these. So as long as we do this basic stuff here, we'll beat these because we are better than these.
Because I suppose one of the main anxieties that permeated the fan base earlier this season, and maybe it's a hangover from last season, but it was that this team hadn't quite fulfilled its full potential just yet. And it feels like these last 3 games, it's starting to do that, stepping up to the level that we know that we can. Because one of the criticisms always was that Farke's team earlier in the season, when they had their foot on the neck of the opposition, didn't carry on pressing down. Sometimes they backed off a little bit. But I think these last 3 games, it's fair, rampant purring, I suppose, does make sense to me.
I think some of that is a hangover from last season as well, when people said the same thing, but that was with the midfield of Grove and Kamara, and that was a lot more defensive than we've seen this season. It did tend to create a bit more side to side, and I think Bogle's impact at fullback as well has actually been as brilliant as Archie Gray was, and will go on to great things. Bogle has turned us into a better team going forward.
Well, we've talked about it in this space before, but I'm pretty convinced that this is a better squad this season than last season. And I think the evidence is there to back that up now. I think the difference is there were 2 or 3 sort of standout players in the squad last season in terms of output, you know, the things that win you games. There were lots of good players, but there were 2 in particular who could do something a bit more, which you require to get to the next level. But as a group, this group, I think I think the recruitment's been pretty much spot on, I've got to say. I mean, you think of the players who've come in and what they've been able to do and what they've been able to contribute. So you do have the look of a very strong squad now. And the comment that Tom Cleverley made after the game the other night, I thought was interesting. Where didn't he describe Leeds as being like a mid-table Premier League side? Which
I would take, BRYN.
Well, that's. I'm not sure he's right, by the way, but it's a new compliment in football, isn't it? That you look like a side at the mid-level in the division above, which is a huge compliment because it means that you are way better than the level that you're currently playing at, because the gap is perceived to be, and is, by the way, so very, very big. So that comment, if he's a football guy, he should know what he's talking about. So if he's anywhere near accurate, then that would tell you that Leeds are in a pretty decent place currently. A, to get out of this one, and then B, to do something in the next one. Because even in the aftermath of Tuesday night, another hugely enjoyable game where Leeds have scored good goals and played really well, there's still that thought process, which is, well, you get to the end. The outcome here, we hope, is, promotion, obviously, but then what lies ahead? So I was having a conversation with someone in the aftermath who said, someone quite important, seniors, we were saying, enjoy it now, because there's no guarantee that you maintain this level of enjoyment into hopefully what will be the next challenge, because it's much, much, much more difficult.
Whichever way this does pan out, you are letting yourself in for a struggle next season, or the summer, at very least. If we stay down, it'll be awful because we will have blown it again, and there'll be huge changes within the playing squad. So that'll be awful. But let's park that for now. But you know that the prize at the end...
that's it. I'm done now. I'm off.
But the prize at the end of this is a struggle in the Premier League, isn't it? But it's desirable compared to staying down here.
Well, it's essential.
Forever.
It's not just desirable. It's essential because for reasons you've just described there, we've said this before as well, that Leeds have to get promoted. That's the reality of the dream, the project, whatever you want to describe it as. Leeds have to get promoted. So they're well on course to do that for sure. And then there's another huge job to do in the aftermath. But, if you, from a purely selfish point of view, I made this point to somebody I was talking to around this sort of subject. Imagine being Southampton's club commentators this season. Oh my God, how difficult must that be? Because you invest, you put yourself into it. You're not separate to it. You feel part of it. And we turn up before the game and we see the players on the side of the pitch before the match, and we're wearing the coat and all the rest of it. So you feel like part of the sort of the match day group, if you like. And then you watch the game and you emotionally invest in the game, and then at the end of it, you see the people after it as well. And it's. I'll testify, every single game that I've done for LUTV since I arrived back on the scene, which is 6 years ago or whatever it is now, every single game since then has had something riding on it. Pretty much every single game. There has not been, FA Cup ties apart, and even technically they're meant to have something riding on them, but there hasn't been a game which doesn't have a necessary outcome here.
Is that why Leeds is so exhausting?
Oh, God. Yeah, it is.
It is. You're right.
Because forever, every game's been important. So we talk about, it's a huge game, blah, blah, pressure on it. But actually, it's every single game has required us to invest in it emotionally because the outcome is important, and that remains the case now all these years further down the line. So it was the case in getting out of the Championship in that first season, successfully achieved. And then it was the case in, I suppose, though, actually, in fairness, there were parts of that first Premier League season where Leeds had clearly got enough points on the board. So maybe I'm over-exaggerating slightly here. It didn't really feel like it at the time.
No, it didn't. No.
But you wanted them to keep pushing on, which they did sort of really successfully, and finished the season with 3 or 4 wins or something, didn't they? But there was nobody in the ground for any of that. So that was slightly different anyway. But then from the following season onwards, when things didn't spark quite as successfully, then it became a proper slog in a way, and you were hoping all the wins felt like Norwich City at home, like this is amazing, because you were waiting another 3 weeks for the next one, kind of thing.
All a bit much. But I don't know. It feels to me like I'm personally mentally gearing myself up for it now, and I'm ready. And you said actually in the wake of the Watford game, I think you were ready for it. and I suppose the club is gearing towards all that sort of thing. Plans for the stadium, presumably, new staff in the background, all that kind of thing. The whole operation feels ready to gear up for the Premier League. But we do need to get there first. And I was going to say, in terms of your involvement in the day-to-day, BRYN, have you noticed from speaking to people like after Cardiff, for example, they won 7-0. And I wonder, when you did the post-match interviews, Farke's very much one for not going too high or too low, regardless of the outcome. Did you recognise that in the post-match at both Cardiff, Coventry and Watford? What's the sort of the vibe being given off by the people that you're interviewing there? Are they staying on the level?
Yes, they are. And I think they've been very impressive. It's another sign of a successful group is that the people within the group grow a little bit more confident in the way that they kind of present themselves. I don't know. I think a good group has people who can speak confidently in it. So the stuff that I do with coaches and that kind of thing, I think you would be transferring that into a group of players who are comfortable in each other's surroundings, so that they are then confident enough to be right on the message when they go and talk, do their media bit. So some of the interviews in the last few weeks have been absolutely on the mark. So I mentioned Ethan Ampadu after the Burnley game. We've done some stuff with Pascal Strauch. Manor Solomon spoke really well after the game in midweek. They're enjoying talking about the stuff, but they're also aware as to, there are effectively limitations here where nobody's saying, we're going to win the league by 20 points or anything like that. It's nice. It's good delivery. I'm enjoying that part of the process currently as well.
Do you feel like the slightly older core of the team is helping this year? Because I'm thinking of swapping people out like Bogle in for Gray. You've got, even though they're not particularly old, people like Solomon and Tanaka have played a lot of football and seen a bit of the world. Do you think that's actually
I think there's
helping us?
I think it's great. I think there's some really good personalities in the dressing room. Again, comes to the fore. I mean, we've talked about Neil Warnock, I think, in this environment in the past. And I've done a lot with, as I've mentioned, with Neil down the years. I stayed in his holiday home in Lou one summer, but
sounds so glamorous.
That's another story. But he had a group together at Sheffield United, that hugely successful group he had at Sheffield United that kept getting to cup semi-finals, and not hugely successful group. They got promoted and stuff like that. And he had some great individual characters in that group there, some really solid guys.
Great bunch of lads.
They were a great bunch of lads. And if I went to the training ground, as I often did, to do stuff with them, it was with a sort of happy heart, because I was going to get a nice welcome when I got there from people who go, all right, okay, how's it going? Who would have just a chat and then would do an interview. And those things actually should be commonplace, but aren't necessarily. But there is, in a group that's going well, all those things it all gets lifted. And everybody benefits from that. So there are a couple of players in the Leeds group who don't have quite as much to say as some of the others. So when their turn comes around, because they do it on a rotation basis, when their turn comes around to do the pre-match interview in particular, but also perhaps the post-match, they don't have quite as much to say. But even a couple of those guys are edging closer to where I would, media train them to be, which is give me an answer that's about 20 to 25 seconds long with a start, a middle and an end. So we even they're being brought along by the group, and the group has that confidence in itself that when it sends an emissary out to speak to the media, they know what job to do.
It's interesting to note that, actually. I hadn't thought about the ages so much, Michael, but the three big players that we lost in the summer, Somerville's just turned 23 this season. Jorginho Ruto is actually younger than him. He's 22, about to turn 23 in April. And obviously Archie Gray, still a teenager.
And for all three of them,
18, about to turn 19.
It was the breakout season for all of them, wasn't it, last year? I know Somerville and Ruto had been around and have played. It's not like they hadn't played football before, but it was the seasons that made them, wasn't it, last year?
Mm.
There's an intensity in the group as well, which is also tangible. And it shows in the way that they're playing now, which is one of the aspects I really enjoy. I keep asking Daniel about the hard work being the basis of it, because it's one thing having a skill set that you want to show and display, but as we tend to know in football, it has to be underpinned with you doing all the stuff where you go and get the ball first off and stop the opposition doing their thing. And once you've got the ball off them,
is that they earn the right to play?
You've got to do all that stuff. And once you've got the ball off them and kept the ball off them, then you can go and do your thing. and they're grinding teams down. This sense of when you'll see the player in possession for the opposition, suddenly there are 3 Leeds United players all in the vicinity, like little terriers snapping at the heels. And you've got to do that from the first minute to the last minute. So even when you're winning 2-0 and on course for victory, I still want to see them still doing that. And that's maybe one of the things we've seen, particularly since Burnley, I think, is that complete intensity and desire to get the ball back and let's do this thing again. Let's have another go. And then you get late goals getting scored potentially and all the rest of it. You just wear the opposition down.
And maybe there's been a nice coincidence in terms of the opponents that we've played in this little window where it feels like they're starting to peak and purr. Cardiff, Coventry and Watford all were relatively open and trying to play football against us, whereas maybe, I don't know, in some of the home games we've had this season, and we spoke about the lack of jeopardy, because teams were not even trying to play against us, it was a little bit weird. Because as a footballer, I'm sure you're used to coming up against an opponent who's at least trying to do something. And a lot of them just weren't.
And that's where maybe you stop at 2-0, because you realise, well, if they're not going to change, we're 2-0 up here. So if they're not going to change, they're not going to do anything. So we don't really have to do anything either, because we're now in a position to win the game. And so you could then say, well, save energy for the next one and all the rest of it. That may yet manifest in games to come. But you're right in that the ones that we've seen in the last 3 games in particular, the opposition has somewhat naively, it has to be said, in pretty much every instance, has tried to have a go. And there's nothing that this Leeds team likes better than the opposition who've decided they're going to try and have a go.
Does beg the question of what we will face on Monday against Sunderland. I felt like we deserved to win up there, and we were within 1 bounce away from.
Let's not even go there.
We don't need to, do we? We've hit the big reset button on Elon Meslier and everything's fine. But it's going to be an absolutely storming game at Ellen Road. I think that all that stuff we were talking about, like the jeopardy, is just going to, under the lights, Monday night, it's going to make for a brilliant recipe for a brilliant game of football. I'm genuinely really looking forward to it, which you would say off the back of a 7-0, a 2-0 and a 4-0. It could have been an aggregate 20-0.
It feels set up in the same way as the Leicester game did last season, though, doesn't it? It's one of those where you just hope it can match up to it, I suppose, because you go into it with big hopes and such a chance to put a marker down, don't you, where it wouldn't rule Sunderland out, but it puts them a hell of a long way back, doesn't it?
Well, I found myself now in the midst of all of this, getting more and more kind of embroiled in the whole process. So when Sunderland and Burnley and Sheffield United were all at home for their midweek fixture this week, I was flicking between the 3 games, majorly watching the Sunderland game, because that goes down in the book as research. So I was having a look at them. Clearly, once they'd gone 1 up against Luton, they were only ever going to win that, because Luton, as we've seen so often at Ellen Road, just didn't have it about them to get back in that game. Had 1 chance, I think. And then I flicked over. I saw Middlesbrough equalise against Sheffield United and thought, okay. And then Sunderland got another one against Luton, so that was over. So I came off that one. Burnley were 2 up already. So once Burnley had gone 1 up, that game was over. That was 9 minutes, I think, wasn't it? So I was monitoring, and then the last one I was left to monitor with anything riding on it was the Sheffield United game. And so I watched Middlesbrough go at one end and create a really good chance, and then get immediately sucker punched on the counter-attack. And Brereton Diaz picked the ball up and was running towards goal. So the commentator, I was, as you usually are these days, half an eye on the phone or whatever. And so the voice levels went up. So I saw Brereton Diaz running towards goal, clear run towards goal. I thought, no, I'm not going to watch this. And looked down and looked away to hear the commentator describe the goal going in. At which point I thought, right, okay, so they've won this game then. And then obviously a bit later they added another one as well. So we ended up at the end of all of that, we ended up in exactly the same place we were at the beginning of all of that, which is those 4 teams at the top all winning again. And that's going to be repeated pretty much every weekend, you suspect, until the end of the season, except that somewhere in the midst of all of that, there are going to be some blip results, inevitably.
And our next 2 games. Plus, you've got Sheffield United and Burnley to play one another around Easter. So these are the spicy ones.
But the ones that will actually probably decide it, Farker intimated at this after Leeds beat Norwich. And then we said to him, big game coming up against Burnley. He went, no, this is the big game, because you've got to do it in these ones. Burnley, just another game kind of thing. And he's right, because somewhere in the pack there's a Plymouth or a Hull City or a somebody else. You know, Plymouth went to Sunderland the other week and came away with a draw. Watford went up there and came away with a draw. Somebody in the midst of the group just has one really good day or one really good night and does something unexpected, because that's what happens in the Championship. And that could completely flip everything this season. That could make all the difference.
And if you look back to last season, like, for example, we went away to Huddersfield and Rotherham, who were ultimately relegated, and we left 4 points there, didn't we? And just grinding out some, if the inverted commas, the easy wins is something we seem to have done in this recent run.
Well, there's some mad stuff going on at the top of the Championship this year. Look at Burnley's stats. I mean,
crazy,
it's ridiculous. They've hardly scored any goals, and yet they've got, what's their goal difference now? Plus nearly 30, isn't it?
About 37, I think, actually. Yeah, something like that.
I think it's a bit less than that.
But, you're right, it's 30, yeah. So they've scored 39 and conceded 9.
So they've barely scored any goals, but the goals against, they've broken the record, haven't they, for the most clean sheets. So they are literally almost never ever conceding a goal this season. And yet they're in, where are they now? 3rd place, aren't they still? So they're in 3rd place. They've got great points total. They've barely lost a game, but they've barely scored a goal either. Yeah. So the way you see, they've had X number of 0-0 draws at home. I mean, the Leeds one was the 2nd or 3rd on the spin or whatever, wasn't it? So there's some weird stuff going on. I mean, the teams at the top are hardly losing any games. So what's the spread between the two of them? 3 for Leeds, 3 for Sheffield United, 2 is it for Burnley?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry, it's 5 for Sheffield United. So okay. 3, 5, and 2.
So that's nothing, is it? Combined total across 3 clubs, way past the halfway stage.
Even
of the
Sunderland's
season.
4, so 14 defeats across 4 teams. Yeah.
So there's some mad stuff going on here. There's a gulf between the top 4 and the rest for sure, and then there's a mini gulf, not a big enough gulf, between the top 3 and the 4th. The key gulf, obviously, the one that needs further expanding, is the one between, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. That's the one, because you only need to finish top 2. Winning the thing is nice, but is not essential. It's top 2, so that's the one that opens. But at the moment, you would speculate that, well, all those results tell you is that every game that isn't between those teams in that top group is going to be a win.
22 clean sheets for Burnley. We're in 2nd place with 20.
Which Leeds are going to break all sorts of records. The Leeds goal difference is already at record-breaking levels, or tantamount to record-breaking levels, and is well on course to potentially smash that. There's some weird kind of dynamics with the whole stats bit in the Championship this season. But having said all of that, if that's all true, then the best team should win the league, right? And I think we've seen the best team.
As you said, Michael, the unromantic way to look at this is it's the team with the most money. And
tends to happen that way.
Yeah. So,
well, there's 2 ways, aren't there? You create a team or you buy a team. And I'm not saying Leeds have have completely bought the team, but the recruitment has been good. It's been, if I think my lot at Wrexham are in the division below, and I'll be watching them away at Northampton on Saturday, and I'll watch a completely different game to Watford Leeds, for instance, because if I'm realistic and honest about it, the gulf between Wrexham, who are 3rd currently in League One, and Leeds United, who are top of the Championship, is a million miles in terms of the type of player and the type of football and all the rest of it. So there is, and that is a truism, that if you get better players than everybody else, you give yourself the best possible chance of getting promoted. Otherwise, you coach a team better. But who gets a chance to do that now? Because the guy's in charge for 6 weeks, loses 3 games, and then gets the sack.
Football, eh?
So that's why people invest in teams.
What did your research of Sunderland show you?
It showed me they're okay. But I mean, we knew that from the game at their place, didn't we? And Leeds should have won that one. Clearly, it was a really good second half performance. Should have won it, but they're all right. They've recruited quite well. I think the new guys coming from Italy, that was a real surprise signing, that one, because Tony knows of him from arriving in Italy at the start of this season. He came in with quite a lot of fanfare, and then got injured quite early on, and it hasn't quite happened for him. So it's quite a coup, I think, from Sunderland's recruitment department to get him in. Lafay, is it? And,
Enzo Lafay.
Yeah. And I saw him set up the mad goal that won it for them. I watched that one as well. I'm torturing myself here, the Middlesbrough game, you know, Middlesbrough are going to win this. Middlesbrough are going to win this. Oh no, they've lost it. How on earth did that happen? With a 15-yard own goal volley. So he set that up though, and he looks a player. You know, every team that's going to do well in the Championship needs a couple of players who could play, at least a couple who definitely could play at the level above. So I think Sunderland have invested heavily, haven't they? It's cost them quite a lot of money to get somebody like that in. Yeah. So they look all right. Isadore's is okay. Scored a few goals, hasn't he, up front? They're quite well set up at the back. They don't concede many. So they've got all the elements there. But at the end of the day, if you go man for man, certainly if you go group v group, I'd have Leeds coming out on top.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how the last few games are going to inform the opposition choices in these, because Sunderland are a team who, generally speaking, will come out and try and attack, whether or not they come to Ellen Road with the aim of trying to get something on the break or
I
set piece.
Think back to that Sheffield United game at home when they set up in a completely different way for that game than they had for the one previously, and he put a lot of defenders in, I was quite surprised that he took that approach, and it didn't work. They lost the game, and so, you know, I suppose would they? Well, we'll see, won't we? In a week and a bit's time, will the approach be different in terms of them? We'll have a go this time then. But I don't know. It'll be at the moment. Both teams have tried to do it both ways at Ellen Road. One or two have come and had a go. It's not gone well. Most of the others have come to do nothing, and ultimately it hasn't gone well. So in most instances, but I would think that Sunderland will come and try and play a bit.
Their possession stats, they're quite middling. An average possession of 49% across the games so far. So they're not a very possession heavy side.
I don't know what that means.
I said there are teams that have tried to come and have the ball and use it. I'm saying they don't appear to be, statistically at least, a team that dominates possession in the same way that Leeds were the highest, 61.3% above Swansea, Norwich, and then Burnley. I think
that quite often the settler in these kind of matches is, and it was the case in that Sheffield United Middlesbrough game the other night, is that it was a great pass out of defence or midfield to play Brereton Diaz in. They brought in Brereton Diaz, so he's part of their recruitment drive. They've brought in like the Cannon as well from Stoke. They're going, you know, the term being we're going for it here. So Brereton Diaz gets the ball at his feet and he finishes with aplomb, and that's why he's been brought in to do that thing. I think the difference in some of these games is when you've got the guys or the guy who can do that. Then that's the concern for Leeds against Sunderland, is that if Lafay has a good game, we know he's a good player. So if you allow him the opportunity to do something, he could well take advantage of that. So it's the not allowing the good players to do what they can do that may be important to the outcome.
Here's a frightening stat, or a good stat, an encouraging stat. It's the expected goal stat. We've scored 66 off an expected goals of 62.3. So we're about in line there or thereabouts. Sunderland are fourth in the division. They've scored 49 off 45.4. So they're about in line. And I think that's maybe where you're seeing the difference with Leeds this season, is that we're such a statistical outlier in terms of the number of chances we're creating versus the opposition, that you'd hope that's where you win it. If we can dominate possession, then maybe we wait it out and just wait for a chance to appear, which is what it felt like a little bit like Watford, where we didn't have the lion's share of possession there, but we just felt like we were going to score every time we had it.
Well, they're predisposed to hit teams on the counter attack, aren't they? Because there's a pace of movement and a quality of passing in there that can exploit on both of those fronts. So if you're waiting for the opposition to give the ball away in your half, you're also waiting for what you can do very quickly thereafter with that. So Leeds have the capability of doing that. And as you go further down, there'll be less capability of the other teams you're playing against being able probably to do that on anything like a regular basis. Sunderland can probably do that in the right circumstances, getting the ball into the right person to do that thing. The more of those guys you've got, as Leeds have got that spread of goals across, you know, good goal numbers across a number of players now, that tells you that there are contributions coming in from lots of different players here, which is important because that gives you the opportunity. You'll score more goals. The more goal scorers you've got, you'll score more goals.
So with your commentators head on then, how are you framing this one on Monday?
Well, we usually start with a must win or must not lose thing, don't we? But I think, it's another game at home. I like that stat that somebody produced a few weeks ago. I'm not a huge stats fan. I don't really understand XG, Dan. I mean, all that stuff just went straight over my head. I don't get it. Anyway, I don't even really know what it stands for.
Expected goals.
Yeah,
it's just it's because when you get you
don't
shot,
try and explain it to me.
It's dead simple because like you used to measure things like shots and then shots on target,
right?
But there was no qualitative measure of how good those shots had been. So a 40-yard shot from way out there could count as a shot on target, even if the keeper's just caught it in his hand. So what XG does is try to quantify the quality of those chances from the position on the field in similar circumstances.
Who does that?
Geeks.
Geeks do it, do they?
Geeks do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously going to meet some of these geeks. Is there a room somewhere?
Yeah, there is. I think they have an annual meetup. But no, I'm just a bloke who reads the numbers and says them out loud. But it's supposed to measure the quality of the chances that you create.
Well, this is fascinating, and I walk away from here today with more than I walked into the room.
Every day's a school day.
It can be. Anyway, so commentators head on is that the stat that I liked was the one about something along the lines of Leeds have got X number of home games left. If they win them all, they win the league because they can't statistically or mathematically or whatever else lead. They can't anything but lead. So I'm working on the basis of whatever that was. I mean, obviously I'm lacking a bit of detail here, but I'm working on the basis that if they keep winning the games at home, that enough might be enough.
Yeah.
So that makes the home games important because the home games take the pressure off the away games as well. So if Leeds win the next one, it's only about the next one. I think we do that. We're doing that quite well in commentary. We don't talk about the other games. We just talk about this one. And then at the very end, we'll throw a question into Daniel, possibly about the next one. But that's the first time anybody talks about games thereafter. And that's probably the same mindset as in the dressing room, I would imagine. So I think you just look on these all in isolation, and it looks like a great game. You've given it the big build up already, so 0-0 draw guaranteed. But it does look like one because there's football to enjoy. Leeds are playing football to enjoy. They're scoring good goals. They're playing good stuff, and there's a things have been a little flat mid period in the season, mainly for various reasons. But I think there is a lift again there now, and there's a sense that we're getting
the finish line's there.
Well, that's it. So we're getting close now. So that does add more to each of the fixtures. It adds more to every single game. Now, you saw it in the post-match celebrations after Watford. It's the first time we've seen the players do the German thing where they all go. Daniel obviously comes and does his thing on a regular basis, but now all the players and coaching staff, everybody joined that line, and that was that's another little sign that everybody's becoming more and more aware that the end is drawing near now. And so that makes all these games more exciting and also carry more weight, from the both perspectives kind of thing.
Should be fun, shouldn't it? I think. Is fun the right word?
Fun is not a...
Could be fun.
It could be fun. But fun is rarely a word I use. We do have, listen, now that's not fair. We do have a lot of fun, but the games themselves are not always a lot of fun. But I think you get where I'm coming from here.
I was going to say that decades have been around Leeds United. Is that off a 7-0, 2-0, and a 4-0? You're saying it's still not quite fun?
No, they've all been a lot of fun. In the aftermath, go, no, that was fun.
Yeah.
But in the midst of it doesn't always feel. Get the third. I'm like this. Third or fourth, Tony said it in commentary about me. Third or fourth, I start to chill out a little bit, and I actually start to get a little bit giddy by that stage because I think they might do this, I can't see.
Hold on.
I can't see them getting a point out of this one, and it does take me quite a while to get to that position.
Well, let's hope you have fun on Monday. BRYN, cheers. We'll do it again soon.
Look forward to it.
The Square Ball Podcast.